technology.
Yeah.
All the time. It drives me mad.
Fantastic.
Drives me mad.
So are you going to ask me questions, or am I just going to talk a little bit?
No, just say who you are, I
Sure.
think, and clearly we are, you might just say, although we are not an academic function, we provide an engaging and increasing role in life within an academic environment. And that is because we believe our faculty or our discipline.
Sure. No. It's very interesting. I love the overlaps. It's great. You know, like the thing about puzzles and so on. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah.
There's a lovely. It reminded me of what you said about puzzles that you said with one of our colleagues. You know, there's this lovely quote by Debussy where he says that music is to arithmetic. So in other words, he's talking about music as music which has its emotional impact in when it's delivered and articulated, but the fact that what is being done is very, very structured. So he says music is to arithmetic what light is to optics. So you have the big notion of light, and that it's part of its organised, a part of its organised formula can become optics, as music in relation to arithmetic, you know. And of course, there's a huge. I mean, there's a very large topic of overlay of interdisciplinary, which it really is, between this the early 18th century, late 17th century, early 18th century, which in classical music terms is encapsulated by J.S. Bach, who took all that came before him, technically, and then there's the big flowering of a particular way of organising musical structure, thought, and emotion together, with Escher, for example. So the image systems and the structures behind Escher having parallels with the structural elements inside J.S. Bach's music. And for me, there's a very strong thing with Bach, where he represents one of those moments in musical composition history where the emotional impact of what is articulated is matched by its intellectual rigorous content. So the way that the music is structured is unbelievably sophisticated, and it's full of rules and structural devices and mathematics, and yet when it's delivered, it has 100% emotional impact. So you have these two things simultaneously going on. So you have a sort of intellectualism and an emotional side which are forged together. So he does have this remarkable position in music history in terms of, and in a way that's an interdisciplinary thing. I mean, to talk about creativity in music making, and it's particularly the case here at the university because we essentially are a service. We're not training people to become professional in music making. Of course, we have students who do go into the profession, but the raison d'etre of this place is to participate in the making of it. And you participate in it if you want. If you walk through the door, you can participate, you know. And I think clearly this has a social function of, well, it's on many levels actually, but there is a profound social function behind what happens here, which is that people come together to engage in a creative artistic act together. And the ramification of this is a social one. And interestingly, for me, I perceive it as being more of a social function than an artistic function, which is quite an interesting as a point of perception is quite interesting, and it also it illustrates the fact that it's quite unusual that that's the case, because if you're at a conservatoire, you don't necessarily go into a room to make music in order to engage with a creative artistic endeavour with others. You maybe go in simply to get to the next level of a career path, or the next level of technical prowess, or the next level of interpretive skill, or the next level of presentational skill, or the next level of how you play your scales and arpeggios. But it's not necessarily wider than that as a given. So I would say, in terms of the creativity question, I would say that music making is all about creativity. And it's very interesting for me to see here, because we have these big groups who meet regularly once a week. We have, this week we had a wind and brass concert, and when they're all standing backstage, lining up to go on, for example, there's an energy invested in how it starts already backstage. The lining up, who stands next to who when preparing to walk on, the tuning of the instruments process, which is quite often seen off stage with the brass band, for example, and then they come on and sit in their structured positions on the stage, which is, even how the instruments positioned in relation to one another in an ensemble is a big deal. Why you sit next to who you sit next to has a history that goes back, decades and decades. And I would say that all of that process, from the process of deciding to participate, through the process of preparing, rehearsing every week, and having an end target of maybe a performance or a competition or a recording, that all of that, they're all different facets of creativity, all of them. It's a creative act to arrange how you position yourselves when you're in a group of 80. That is a creative act. There's a conscious intellectual rationale for why, but then there's also a creativity about making that happen. All of these things for me do very much. They can all connect back to a figure like Bach. You think that it was Bach who had this fantastic expertise, and he was living in a very particular Christian church structure,
yes,
if you like,
in Eisenach.
Yeah, which was both the spiritual quest, creative, and the means to earn a living and be a professional and gain an income and a livelihood and an adequate way to live.
He was his production levels were terrific.
Yes, absolutely.
Phenomenal.
Yeah,
weren't they?
Yes, absolutely.
And would you say Haydn had a similar role? Because so many people learned from what Haydn did.
Yes, they did. Yeah.
But you thought Bach has a pivotal role in all that.
Well, I think he does. He's sort of like if you think we're still using a basic language, which was devised before Bach, but he's the first quintessence of that.
Yeah.
The first fully formed mighty structure is his oeuvre, and everything you can still relate everything to this, you know, in all Western tradition. You can relate everything. You can look at a very complicated chord in a piece by Webern, and you could still analytically say that comes from Bach, for example. So it's a condensation. It's a condensed. He represents a condensed moment in time. Of course, he wasn't the only one, but we know. You know, we view historically him as being the centre, the centre of all that, and it's to do with the fact that the music is so complex, and yet it doesn't sound like it to the listener necessarily.
No, that's true.
You know, there's this sort of emotional. There's an emotional thing that happens because of all the rigour, all the intellectual rigour. You know, and Haydn. Haydn developed musical structure for a certain type of band of musicians, and he was having to deliver this on a weekly basis. So he was having to create all the time new materials which were being articulated that week, and then immediately on to the next thing. And he did push the engagement with structure, what loosely is called symphonic thinking. He experimented every week with this idea,
with something new,
and was pushing all the boundaries of that structure. And of course, he also represents a very interesting political moment in history too, because I love the story that the Esterhazy family took a summer residence, which was somewhere far away, and the musicians, because they were servants, the musicians had to go to the summer residence, but there wasn't room for their families to go. So then, because there's no union, so today there'd be a union to say this is not unacceptable working conditions, because there wasn't this, Haydn used his composition to make the feelings of himself and his musicians known to the aristocracy, and the message was understood. But I mean, how extraordinary to send a message through. So he was not able to write a letter to his employer saying these are unacceptable working conditions because he was a servant, but he could write music that they could hear and experience, that gave them that meant they could understand that message, which I mean is amazing, isn't it?
That's a fantastic story, and I think that's brilliant. We'll pause there. Sorry to put you on.
Sure.